The day Plano's perfection cracked. On a tranquil Saturday morning in Plano, Texas, a stillness hung in the air, broken only by the chirping of birds and the distant hum of a lawnmower. The sun, a warm yolk yellow, spilled over the meticulously manicured lawns and identical brick homes, a picture of suburban bliss. It was a scene so perfect it felt almost staged. And into this staid perfection stepped James Parker. He was an unassuming man, his only deviation from the neighborhood norm being the easy, almost mischievous twinkle in his eyes. With a black trash bag in hand, he walked toward the curb, ready to perform the mundane ritual of Saturday morning. He had no idea this simple act was about to ignite a firestorm. At the end of his driveway, a trio had gathered, casting long, dramatic shadows. At the center was Sarah Whitfield, the HOA president, a woman whose smile was as manicured as her petunias. But today, the smile was gone, replaced by a grim, hard line. Flanking her were two hulking men in black tactical vests, emblazoned with the words community enforcement. James's easygoing morning evaporated. This felt less like a neighborly dispute and more like a scene from a bad action movie. Mr. Parker, Sarah's voice was as sharp as a newly sharpened knife. We need to talk. James set the trash bag down, a subtle shift in his stance. His curiosity, a coiled spring, was about to be released. About what? He asked, his voice calm, but with an edge. The taller of the two men, a shaved-head giant with mirrored sunglasses that hid his eyes, stepped forward. You're in violation of neighborhood regulations. We're here to detain you until the police arrive. A flicker of amusement danced in James's eyes. Detain me? For what exactly? The second man, shorter but broad-shouldered, rustled a crumpled piece of paper. Property violations, noncompliance with HOA orders, unauthorized modifications to your driveway. The list goes on. James let out a low, disbelieving laugh. So, you think you can just walk onto my property and detain me? You got the wrong guy. The air thickened with tension. Curtains twitched in windows up and down the street. Neighbors, phones in hand, were ready to capture the unfolding spectacle. You can come peacefully, the taller man said, his voice a low growl, or we'll make it harder on you. James took a step forward, his voice losing its playful edge and hardening into something else entirely. Let me explain something to you. There's no such thing as community enforcement. You're trespassing. Sarah's cheeks flushed crimson with a mixture of anger and desperation. You think you're above the rules because of who you are? We can't have someone undermining our community. James's eyes narrowed. Sarah didn't know it, but she was playing a game with someone who had spent his life dealing with far more dangerous players. James wasn't just a homeowner. He was a special agent with the FBI. Instead of revealing his identity, he just smiled. You've picked the wrong driveway today. Sarah's desperation grew. These men have the authority to hold you. James dropped the trash bag. The sound echoed like a gunshot. It wasn't an act of surrender. It was the sound of a game-changing move. The neighborhood was watching. He wasn't about to back down. The tall man stepped forward, his boots scuffing on the concrete. Sir, don't make this difficult. You're being non-compliant. James's smirk widened. You're standing on my property with no badge and no legal authority. You got 30 seconds to back off before you regret this. Sarah's frustration reached a boiling point. We exist to keep this neighborhood safe. James's gaze was steady. Respect isn't forced with fake cops and threats. It's earned. And right now, what you're doing isn't about rules. It's about control. He could sense their confidence wavering. You want to know what real authority looks like? It's not two men playing soldier. It's training, law, accountability. And I promise you, the real cops will be very interested in this little performance. He dropped his voice, low and menacing, a line meant only for the imposters. You want to know what happens when you impersonate an officer? It's prison time, not community service. The shorter man's resolve crumbled. Maybe we should just go, he muttered, but the tall man, Eddie, wasn't ready to lose. Last warning. You either come with us peacefully or we'll use force. James leaned in, his voice cutting like a razor. Son, I've dealt with cartel enforcers who are less reckless than you. Do yourself a favor and move back before this turns into something you can't walk away from. Doubt flickered across Eddie's face. But Sarah, desperate to maintain her power, shouted, "Don't let him intimidate you." The crowd, now fully engaged, began to murmur their support for James. The tide was turning. "This is your last chance," James said. "Walk away now before the whole block watches you get hauled off in handcuffs." Eddie hesitated, sweat beading on his forehead. The crowd was no longer passive spectators. They were a living, breathing force. "Listen to me carefully." James's voice was like steel. "You leave quietly and pray the police don't charge you, or you keep pretending you have power, and this street watches you get dismantled in real time." Finally, the shorter man spoke up. "I'm not going to jail for this, Eddie." Eddie's bravado cracked. "Maybe he's right, Sarah. Maybe we should just go." But Sarah's face was a mask of twisted anger. "You think this is about your reputation? I'm not going to let him win." James's gaze remained fixed on Eddie. "You lay one finger on me, and I promise you, the real police won't even have to ask me who you are. They'll already know." The crowd erupted, the pressure mounting. Eddie's shoulders sagged, his grip on the cuffs loosening. James straightened up, his voice rising, a declaration for all to hear. "This is the end of your game. You don't have authority. You don't have power." Sarah's desperation boiled over. "You don't belong here. You never have." James's expression softened, but his tone was firm. "You just told everyone exactly who you are." As the standoff reached its climax, the distant wail of sirens grew louder. The real police were on their way, and the curtain was about to be pulled back. When the squad cars arrived, James stood tall and calm. "Officers, I'm Special Agent James Parker, FBI. This man attempted to impersonate law enforcement and assaulted me on my property." The officers exchanged a look, their assessment swift and silent. "We'll take it from here," one officer said, as Eddie was led away in handcuffs. Sarah's facade crumbled. "You can't do this. I'm the HOA president." But her words were lost on the wind. James turned to the crowd, his voice steady. "This isn't about lawn height or driveways. It's about people pretending to have authority they don't." The neighborhood buzzed with energy, the tension dissolving as the truth emerged. Sarah's reign of intimidation was over. The community began to heal. In the days that followed, the story of the Plano standoff went viral. Videos circulated online, and James became a symbol of standing up against false authority. The neighborhood transformed. The fear that had once governed their streets began to melt away, replaced by a new kind of dialogue about leadership, accountability, and what it truly meant to be a community. 1 week later, the quiet of Saturday morning returned, but it was a different kind of quiet. Children raced their bikes, and neighbors waved to each other. The air was lighter, the lawns freshly cut, and the tension that had once been a constant presence was gone. James kept his routine simple, leaning against his porch with his coffee, watching the block stir awake. People who had never spoken to him before now offered a nod of respect. What sat on his mind wasn't pride, but a single, powerful lesson he wanted his community to carry forward. That afternoon, the HOA board called a special gathering in the community park. The attendance was a testament to the change in the air. Nearly every household was represented. Families sat on folding chairs, a sense of anticipation in the air. When James arrived, conversations hushed. He wasn't there as an official speaker, just as a neighbor. But Harold Jennings, the newly elected interim president, asked him to address the group. James hesitated, then stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice, but the crowd leaned in, hanging on every word. "Last week," James began, "we all saw what happens when authority is faked, when power is used to intimidate instead of protect. And the truth is, it could have gone very differently. Someone could have been hurt. Kids were watching. Lives could have been ruined far worse than they already were." He paused, scanning the faces in the crowd. "What I want you to take away from that moment isn't about me. It isn't about the FBI. It's about the kind of neighborhood we want to live in. Do we want fear to govern our streets? Or do we want respect and accountability?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "Leadership isn't about control," James continued. "It's about service. And service means putting people first, even when it's inconvenient. That's the difference between authority and arrogance. A hand shot up from the back. It was Mrs. Henderson, her voice strong despite her age. "Mr. Parker, what should we do the next time someone tries something like this?" James didn't hesitate. "Stand together. Speak up. Don't let fear isolate you." The reason those imposters had any chance at all was because they thought the neighborhood would stay silent. Silence is what bullies feed on. But when you speak truth, when you shine light on lies, the game ends. The crowd clapped softly, then louder as the message settled in. Parents nodded, whispering to their kids. The teenagers, including Marcus, filmed from the back, capturing every word for a new live stream. As the gathering ended, people lingered, talking with one another more than they had in years. Strangers introduced themselves, shaking hands, asking about families. The tension that once defined their street seemed to dissolve into something else. Connection. Later that evening, James stood at the end of his driveway, the same spot where everything had gone down just days earlier. The memory of Eddie's cuffs and Sarah's shouts was still vivid. But now, that space symbolized a turning point. He thought back to his years in the Bureau, the endless briefings, the dangerous missions, the times it stared into the eyes of men who lived on fear and power. It struck him that sometimes the battles that mattered most weren't fought in foreign cities or dark alleys. They were fought right at home, on the streets where children played and families built their lives. He whispered quietly to himself, almost as a prayer. The truth always comes to light. The sound of children laughing down the block pulled him back. He smiled faintly, picked up the empty trash can by the curb, and walked it back to his garage, because life was moving forward. And that was the point. For those who had watched the standoff unfold, the moral was clear. Real power comes not from titles, intimidation, or fear, but from honesty, accountability, and the courage to stand firm when it matters most.